Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantirme Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we begin today with chapter 13. It's generally called Kshetra Chetrajna Vibhaga Yoga. It's a distinction between Kshetra and Chetrajna, the two terms that will be described in the text. It's also in a few books, the text that the book that we follow, the translation, this one. It's also called sometimes by the name Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga, distinction between Purusha and Prakriti. Again, these are synonymous with Kshetra and Kshetrajna, but these terms will be described as we continue the study. The earlier chapter, 12, which dealt with the yoga of devotion, we saw that a major portion of that text dealt with what are the qualities essential for someone who identifies as a devotee of God? That if I see myself as one devoted to God, one who loves God, then what are the qualities essential in me in order for me to be able to love God fully, and in order for me to be able to understand and appreciate and feel God's love for me. Now, we see that in the earlier chapter, Krishna says that if you look at, say, verse 7 of the earlier chapter, this is what he says. Those, however, who renouncing all actions in me and being attached to me, worship me with unswerving devotion through meditation, these people who have fixed their minds on me, I quickly redeem from this ocean of transmigratory existence beset with death. Essentially, what Krishna is saying is those who are devoted to God, I will make sure that they are freed from all the limitations of human existence, that they will attain the highest. Now, in order for me to attain the highest, I need to overcome my ignorance. If the problem, the bondage to this limited mortal existence is created through ignorance, then the solution for that is knowledge. So it is through having the knowledge of who I really am that I will become free. And that's what Krishna is proceeding to do in this chapter, to teach me the distinction between who I really am and who at present I think I am. And in general, we know, at present our identity is that we are human beings. And throughout the Gita, that self-understanding that I am a human being is put to test, is questioned. Are you really a human being? Now, what is a human being? Well, first of all, that we are endowed with this body and mind. Secondly, the body is perishable. In other words, our mortality, that we were born at some point, we are going to die at some point. So, the Gita asks us to question that self-understanding. Am I really this mortal, limited being? Or if I look deeply within myself, I might discover something in me which is not mortal, which is not limited, which is not bondage. In other words, within this covering of a human being, is there some deeper truth, deeper reality? And the answer, as we have seen up to this point, and which will be again reiterated again and again, is that within this human form, there is a divine being. And that divine entity within is not subject to birth and death. It's beginningless and endless. It's immortal. It's not subject to any of the limitations. It's infinite. So there is this human being, and within that there is the divine being. Now, the problem is this. Even if we accept that there is something divine in me, even that's a deluded understanding. It's like this. If I say that I am this, and inside me there is divine, what the Gita is really saying is, you are divine, and outside you is the human being. You see, so it's a completely turning our understanding topsy-turvy. So we are not human beings within whom God dwells. We are in fact divine beings outside of whom is this human shell. In other words, even when this human covering goes away, I in my true form remains. And so the distinction between Prakriti or Purusha or Kshetra or Kshetrajna really means recognizing the distinction between matter and spirit, recognizing the distinction between that which is perishable and that which is not perishable. The world that we encounter around us is amazing in many ways, but it's also constantly changing. Nothing. Think of one thing in the world outside that has remained constant. Everything is changing. Everything is changing in the world outside, and everything is changing in this world which is closer to me. Well, what is closer to us than our own body and mind? The table and your computer and your car and your home and your friends are close to you, but closer than all of that is your own body and mind. And your own body and mind are also a part of this world. Just like this world is constantly changing, the body and mind are also constantly changing. So that which I see as me and that which I see as this. So I don't have any illusion. I know this is the table, and I know that I am not the table. I know that this is the human body, but I think this is me. So that's the distinction between the table and this. I can see the table, I can see the body, but I know that I'm not the table, but I have to really, most of us don't even question whether this is me. For most of us, it's like, well, that's so obvious. Now, what Krishna is saying is, just like you are seeing the table and you are seeing the body, is there any difference between the two? Aren't both of them a part of this material world? Aren't both the table and the body both perishable? If you burn a table to ashes, then you burn a body to ashes, and then you have two heaps of ashes. By just looking at the ash, will you be able to tell which is the table ash and which is the body ash? Ultimately, if you break it down to the atoms and molecules, there is nothing to distinguish them. So am I then nothing but this collection of atoms and molecules like this table is? Or there is something else in me which is special, something which is here but not here? So recognizing that distinction, that is what Krishna will teach us in this chapter. So let's read the first words together. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetramityabhidhiyate. Etadyo vetitam prahuhu. Kshetrajna iti tadvidaha. The blessed Lord said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the kshetra, and that which is conscious of it is called chetrajna, embodied self, by those who have knowledge thereof." So, it just goes straight to the point. This body is kshetra. The literal meaning of the word kshetra in Sanskrit means a field. And chetrajna means the knower of the field. So what this verse tells us is that this body is the field. And the one who is conscious of this body is the knower of the field. Well, it seems pretty obvious. So there are now two things: the body and the one who is conscious of the body. Every one of us is conscious of our body. I'm able to see it, I'm able to feel it, I'm able to touch it. Well, I'm conscious of it. So, the one who is conscious of the body is the spirit, which is connected with consciousness, obviously. And the body is the object of the perception. At present, in our minds, the one who is perceiving the body and the body itself have become one. And this has happened only with the body. As I said, not with the table. I am perceiving the table is object of my perception, I am conscious of the table, but my consciousness of the table does not make me think I am the table. My consciousness of the table gives me the knowledge, this is the table. My consciousness of the book gives me the knowledge, this is the book. But my consciousness of the bodies that I see in front tells me, well, these are human beings. But my consciousness of this body makes me think, well, this is me. You see the difference? I'm conscious of everything else, and I know I address it as this or that. But when I'm consciousness of this, I say this is me. Now what this verse tells us is that this body and the one who is conscious of this body try to see them as different. They are not one and the same. So the body is, now why is a body a field? For one thing, let me just say something a little bit more about the body. Normally, when we use the English word body, we mean this. The word that is used here in Sanskrit is sharira, often translated into English as body. But if you go to the meaning of the term itself, sharira means that in Sanskrit, they say, shiryate iti shariram. What is the sharira? That which constantly wears away. That is, constantly is getting disintegrated. So that's the literal meaning of the term sharira. So sharira literally means every material object that gets disintegrated over time. May not get disintegrated immediately. We know, things are perishable, but not all things have the same expiry date. If you go to a grocery store, there is a sell-by date and use before date. Now, not all of them don't have the same date. Some things can remain for a day, some things remain for a week, some things can remain for a year, something can remain for several years. But sooner or later, everything has to go away. So body, therefore, includes all material things, but especially as related to me, as I said, not every material entity I'm seeing as me. I may see them as mine. I may see this as my table, but I will not see that this is me. So if someone comes and breaks it to pieces, I'm going to say, why are you destroying me? Generally, we don't do it. But there are occasions when that our self-identity gets extended. For instance, sometime if someone, say, a person's house is burned down, and the person says, I'm ruined. Now, that's not really true. The house is ruined. But we sometimes get so identified with things which are mine, sometimes we may just call it as me. But generally, it's our body, mind that becomes me, and other things become mine. So why are body and mind called a field? Because all of the work that we do is done either by the body or the mind or both. So all of our thinking, imagining, remembering is a mental activity. It's still an activity. So thinking is a mental done work by the mind, and then of course through the body, from the time we wake up in the morning till the time we go to sleep, the body is just doing lots of different things. Now, every work leads to a result. Actions have consequences. You do something good, it yields wonderful results. You do something terrible, it yields painful results. But every work will lead a result. Now, the result of the work, in Sanskrit sometimes it's called karma phala, the fruit of work. In other words, every work is like sowing a seed. And then that seed comes up as a plant which bears fruits. And of course, you sow seeds in the field. So it's one easy way to remember. Why are the body and mind called a field? Because the seeds of karma, the seeds of work are sown in the body and mind. And that's where the fruits grow. And in experiential terms, the fruits of our work as experience are primarily just two. It's either joy or sorrow. If something good, you feel happy. Something bad, you are miserable. Now, in where are joy and sorrow experienced? Again, joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain are experienced in the body and mind. And that's why the body and mind are a field. That's where the seeds are sown, that's where the fruits grow, and that's where the fruits are experienced. And then there is someone who is conscious of this body and mind. So that which is conscious is chetrajna or purusha. The object of consciousness is prakriti or the field. So let me read that verse again. This body, O son of Kunti, is called the kshetra, and that which is conscious of it is called chetrajna by those who have knowledge thereof. Verse 2. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetrajnayor jnanam yattat jnanam matam mama. I know the kshetrajna embodied itself in all the bodies to be myself, or descendant of Bharata. The knowledge of the kshetra and kshetrajna, matter and spirit, is in my opinion true knowledge. So, Krishna says the divine being is identified with the knower of the field. So, kshetrajna is the divine, kshetra is everything other than it. So all matter, you see the matter as me or mine, is really the field, kshetra. The one who is conscious of that field is the divine being. Is this up to this point? Do you have any questions? Is it clear? Because this is one of the central themes of this chapter. So you have any questions? Okay, so we can proceed. Take a look at that. If you have this copy of this book, take a look at the commentary. The last 5 lines on page 369. It's quoting from the Vishnu Purana, one ancient text. It said, that is real work which does not lead to bondage, and that is true learning which leads to liberation. Work other than that causes only fatigue, and knowledge other than that gives one mere technical skill. So the Sanskrit verse is, Tat karma yan na bandhaya sa vidya ya vimuktaye ayasaya aparam karma vidyanya shilpa naipunam. And this is said in the reference to, that in my opinion is true knowledge. Now, knowledge is a big subject. Defining what knowledge is, it may not be so easy. What we probably can say with greater ease is what knowledge does. And for one thing, knowledge removes our ignorance, that's for certain. If there's something I don't know, and the knowledge will remove my ignorance of that thing. And when ignorance goes away, of any kind of ignorance, it's a very liberating experience. So knowledge leads to freedom. And those could be smaller things like, let's say, if you haven't learned driving yet. Well, if you don't know how to drive, then you are dependent on public transport. Or if there's no public transport available, then you'll have to ask a friend or someone, say, could you please take me there? So your freedom is restricted just because of your ignorance about driving. Now let's say you learn driving. So now you have knowledge of driving. Once that knowledge of driving comes, your ignorance goes away. Not just ignorance, you become more free because you're no longer dependent. Your earlier dependence on others to take you here and there, or a dependence on public transport, is no longer there because now you at least have the option to drive by yourself. That's just one example. So every kind of knowledge, therefore, will remove ignorance and will produce a freedom in some way. Now what Krishna is saying here, that this recognizing the distinction between matter and spirit, recognizing the distinction between the body and mind and the one who is conscious of the body and mind, that knowledge is true knowledge. In other words, all other knowledge is, well, false knowledge. Now, what does it mean? Is my learning how to drive, how is that knowledge false knowledge? Well, it's not false in the sense that we normally use the word false. What it means is this, that while learning to drive will remove some part of my ignorance, will give me some kind of freedom, it leaves a lot of other ignorance untouched. In other words, I may learn driving, but I still may not know Hebrew. It's like this. It just removes one tiny part of, but that's not the only thing we are ignorant about. There are, in the words of, not in the words of, but it's often attributed to Donald Rumsfeld, there are things that we don't know, and there are things that we don't know that we don't know. So there are unknowns, and there are known unknowns, and unknown unknowns, and just, in other words, there are certain things we are aware of that we don't know. But there are a lot of things that we don't know that we don't know. So really, there is no limit to how much we can or need to know. And that really raises a kind of question that is addressed in one of the very ancient Upanishads. So this question was asked several thousand years ago. It's there in Mundaka Upanishad. A disciple named Shaunaka goes to his teacher named Angiras and asks him this question. He asks him, what is that knowledge, knowing which everything becomes known? So it's a little bit like this. Once you figure out that there are a lot of things we don't know, and if you are still not convinced of how much you don't know, just visit any of the libraries, your college library or go to the public library, just move through the stacks and you see thousands of books. And then ask yourself how many of those books you have read. And we suddenly realize, well, there is so much that I don't know. It's a very humbling experience. Sometimes you feel a lot of like, I'm a very knowledgeable person. Just visit a library and then see, oh, there's so much out there and I've read so little. So sometimes this question can come. The time at our disposal to know things is very limited. So within the limited time that's available to us, how much can we really know? How much can we really study? And day by day we are getting older. So as we grow older, our ability to know also become less. The mind is not as sharp as we grow older as it is when we are younger. So the capacity of the human brain to absorb becomes less with age, and time also becomes less. And yet there is so much to know. There is that well-known story, anecdotal story about Isaac Newton, the great father of classical physics, that he was such a great, brilliant mind, but then even you see him towards the end of his life walking on the beach and then just picks up on small, tiny piece of sand, a tiny pebble, and says, through all my life, this is all that I have known. Well, this whole vast ocean, unexplored, still lies before me. So if someone, a great scientist like that, who knew so much, who have done so much, if he could say that I have known so little, what to speak about the rest of us? And therefore this question was, since there is so limited time to know all these things, is there just any one thing that if I know, I will know everything? Which is actually a very valid question. It's like, let's say, I mean, sometimes, the janitors in buildings or like say, if you are responsible for the security of a whole huge complex, and that whole complex that says maybe, say, 25 buildings there, or even it doesn't have to be 25, even if it's 10 or 5 buildings, which has some total of, say, 100 or 200 rooms, and every room needs to be locked, and you are responsible for it. Now just think about it. Just even carrying a bunch of keys, even for your little home, sometimes can be like too heavy. And if you have to carry like 20 keys, it's not going to be easy. And so thank God there is such a thing as a master key. So then you have just one key, and not everyone has access to a master key, but those who are authorized to use it have a master key. There's one key, then you can open any room in this thing. That's much more manageable. Or nowadays, with so much of our life being spent online, and most places asking us to sign up here and there, and security being an issue, and everyone saying, have a username and a password, and we are being told, don't use the same password everywhere. That's not safe either. Now, how are you going to remember so many different passwords? And so thank God again, just like a master key, you have now several apps which are password managers, like 1Password or so many others are there. So what they do is, well, you don't need to really memorize different passwords. It's not possible. Don't waste your energy doing it. Just remember one password. And that then one password manager then will take care of all your other passwords. And it's very convenient. So just as one master key can open all the locks at your home or in a building, one master password can open, you have access to all of your online accounts. Is there any one master knowledge which will remove all of my ignorance? And that is what Krishna is saying, that one master knowledge is knowing the distinction between matter and spirit. If one has come to know the distinction between the body and mind and the one who is conscious of the body and mind, that knowledge is true knowledge, because that knowledge will free me of all my bondage forever. It's not a temporary thing. All other knowledge that we have is temporary. In a sense, now let's go back to the knowledge of driving, for instance. Sure, mostly, usually, if you have learned driving once, you won't generally forget it. Even if you have said, if you don't drive another for say 10 years, next time you have an access to a car, in the beginning you might have to kind of brush up your memory a little bit. But once you have learned something, you won't forget it. Like swimming. Once you learned swimming, in the beginning it might seem like impossible. But once you learn it, then you know it. Now, if you believe in rebirth, if you have learned swimming in this life, that doesn't guarantee that in your next life you will automatically start swimming immediately. You'll have to learn again. So if your ignorance of swimming is eliminated through knowledge of swimming, that is still time-bound because it is only limited to this body and mind. But the knowledge of the distinction between matter and spirit is not limited to only this life. In other words, do you want to solve a problem temporarily, or do you want to solve a problem permanently? And all of the solutions that we have in life, all of them are temporary. They are quick fixes. They are great. You have a headache, take Tylenol, and then guess, zip, it goes away. No guarantee that you will never again have a headache. You will have a headache again, but there is more Tylenol to be taken. But if you know the distinction between matter and spirit, you probably may not need a Tylenol again. So that's what Krishna means by saying the knowledge of distinction between matter and spirit is true knowledge, because it solves all of your problems for all time. Verse 3. Tat kshetram yaccha yadrikcha yat vikari yatascha yat sachayo yat prabhavascha tat samasena me shrunu. What that kshetra is, what it is like, what its modifications are, whence it arises, and what its forms are, and also what the other entity, the chetrajna, is, and what its powers are, hear that from me in brief. So again, he's just setting out what he's going to tell us. So everything that we need to know about matter and about spirit, he's going to describe, but in brief. Because it's in brief, the chapter is so small. If it were very elaborate, then the Gita would have been even bigger. So you are lucky. It's in brief. Verse 4. Rishibhir Bahudha Geetam Chando Bhir Vividhaif Prithak Brahma Sutra Padaish Chaiva Hetu Madbhir Vinishchitaihi. It has been sung differently by the sages and variously in different Vedic hymns, as also in passages indicative and descriptive of Brahman, furnished with reasons and decisive. Again, he's just telling you that what he is going to describe in brief now is not something that originated with Krishna, that it has already been a part of the tradition for thousands of years. It's sung by the sages, that means it's part of the Vedas, part of the Vedic hymns. It's also in the three foundational texts of Vedanta, generally are Brahma Sutra, the Upanishads, the philosophical portion of the Vedas, and the Gita. So it's there in all of these books. That is why the Gita is considered the best summary of the Vedic wisdom. The Vedas are huge. I mean, no one has ever read the complete Vedas. And even if you read it, you won't probably understand most of it. So the beauty of the Gita is that it kind of summarizes in very concise way this vast Vedic wisdom and makes it more intelligible, more palatable, something that we have access to. Partly because the Gita is in classical Sanskrit. The Vedas are also in Sanskrit, but that's Vedic Sanskrit. So it's an ancient form of Sanskrit which has its own grammar. So even if you go to school and study Sanskrit now, that itself may not be enough to study the Vedas, because that's a whole different branch of Sanskrit in some ways, because it's a very ancient form of Sanskrit. You'll understand a little, but some of the things may be different because the grammar is different. But the Gita is more classical form of Sanskrit. So this is more accessible, more intelligible to us today. And so it is this same wisdom that is several thousand years old that Krishna is now going to describe in very briefly. I think I will stop here today, because the next two verses, 5 and 6, he is going to describe the nature of this chetra, and we'll have some things to discuss it. So I'll keep it for next week. You have any comments, questions about what we have discussed today?
So Swamiji, do you have an example of work that does not lead us to bondage? We were told that most work leads us to technical skill.
That's why that one verse that I referred to, it's in the commentary to the second verse, which says, that is real work which does not lead to bondage. So the work that is done as yoga will not lead to bondage. The work that is done without, well, it's like this. And I've sometimes referred to it earlier as this, that work is like a key. We use the same key to lock a room, we use the same key to unlock a room. Just depends on which way you turn it. If turning it this way locks it, turning it the opposite way will unlock it. Work is like that. You do work one way, you do work the wrong way, it increases your stress, increases your anxiety, increases your attachment, produces fear, anxiety, and all of those stuff. You do work the other way, then it does just the opposite. It in fact removes your stress, it removes all fear, it in fact frees you. So, and that's great, because none of us can live without work. And by work, I don't simply mean work done to earn your livelihood. And of course, that's an integral part of our lives. But that's not the only work that we do. Even the things you have to do on weekends is also work. You don't call it work. You may call it your hobby, you may call it recreation, but it's still work. Even if you enjoy cooking, you may not think of cooking as work, but there is still activity involved. There is body, mind involved into it. And so, work is any kind of an activity, body and mind. But we know, even from our present experience, that there are some of the work that we do brings us great joy. Some of the work that we do is extremely painful. Some of the work that we do seems to be very liberating. Some of the work that we do kind of constricts our freedom. And so the solution that the Krishna gives is that if I do work as a form of spiritual discipline, then it can free me. And so it's not, obviously, clearly, the work that is being referred to is ethical work. So you cannot say, well, can I do something bad as a form of yoga? No. I cannot say, can I go and kill someone selflessly as an offering to God? No, probably that will not be yoga. So, not probably, it will not be yoga. So, that work which is in itself unethical, immoral, will always bind me, will always lead to pain and sorrow sooner or later. But even good work can be stressful. Now, if I do that good work as a form of yoga, if I do that good work out of love for God, as an offering to God, or if I do something good just because it's good to do good, without any expectation, without seeking, or without hungering for recognition, praise, then that work will liberate me. But if I do work with just expecting, oh, I hope people like it, I hope people will appreciate it, and people will. It's not that people won't. But if you don't get that recognition, if you don't get that praise, you're going to make yourself miserable. And so that misery is avoidable by just doing what is right, doing what is good, but with no expectations. And generally you will see, if you have done something right, if you have done something good, it will be recognized. It will be appreciated. But because you are not hungering for it, that praise and appreciation will make you happy. But if it doesn't come, you won't be miserable. But if you do something you are wanting it, and therefore, try as much as it is possible to want less. Do all the good you can. Do everything that you feel is right in life. Don't expect anything from anyone. The less you expect from others, the happier you will be. If you don't believe me, try it out for a day. At least for a day. Live for a day with saying, no expectation of any kind. Just one day, try it. And at the end of the day, you tell me whether that doesn't make you feel happy. So, yes, when we become enlightened, we will experience great freedom, no doubt about it. But you can experience great freedom right now. You can experience great freedom by tomorrow. Just make an effort. Even if you don't succeed fully, even if it's a very imperfect attempt, try. I'm going to do what is right. I'm going to do what is good. I'm going to carry out my duties and responsibilities well, but with no expectation. Recognizing that what I deserve will come to me, whether I expect it or not. But I'm not going to expect anything. Try it for a day, and you will be happy.
Hi, it's just the small question about the Sanskrit term. You referred to Prakriti and Purusha and Kshetram and Kshetrajnas. They're probably interchangeable, but I'm just curious, because I study Sanskrit. If you could just say that why they're using the word field, but not like the most common term for the Prakriti and Purusha in the Gita. It's just curiosity.
No, I don't know. I think even the word Prakriti, it's sometimes used in very different ways in the Gita. For instance, sometimes what is Purusha is the Gita sometimes calls it Para Prakriti and Apara Prakriti, higher Prakriti and lower Prakriti.
They're distinct.
So you just have to see the context in which it is being said. So that's why it's very important not to get too much identified with the word itself and see in what context, in what sense it is being used. Because sometimes even the word Atman, normally when I use the word Atman, I'm usually referring to in the sense of spirit. But there are some of the verses in the Gita where in Sanskrit the word Atman is used, but actually referring to the body. So in the translation, they have put it as body. But if you see the Sanskrit, it is something the Atman. So again, the Atman is not some kind of a technical term. Atman simply means the self. Now, if I see this body as myself, I'm treating the body as if it is the Atman. That's the idea. Yeah.
So, I mean, it says that you need to know that chetrajna. So, do we have more than one chetrajna? Because one person knowing the chetrajna is not going to solve everybody the same thing.
Say that again,
Like,
please.
my body is kshetra, and kshetrajna is I am the kshetrajna. So, if I realize, it doesn't mean that somebody else realizes the same thing.
Who is that somebody else?
Because somebody else is also trying to do the same thing.
No, as far as you are concerned, everything other than you is a kshetra. So what you are asking, it's a good question. What you are essentially asking is there a kshetrajna in everybody?
Yes, that's the question.
Or there are many kshetrajnas? Everybody. So if there are now 20 people, are there 20 kshetrajnas here or only one kshetrajna?
Yes.
No harm in thinking that there are 20 kshetrajnas here, but a better way would be to know that there is one kshetrajna who is reflected in 20 bodies. It's like this. Now, if, say, when the sun rises tomorrow and you have 10 buckets filled with water put in the sun, you look in every bucket, there will be a reflection of the sun. Now, because there are 10 buckets, there will not like every bucket will have only 1/10 of the reflection. Every bucket will have a full sun reflected in it. Now, the question is, well, are there 10 suns or one sun? Or maybe 11, 10 plus 1. So, how many suns there are? And well, you can say, in one sense, you could say, well, there are 11 suns. The one up there and the 10 that I see in the bucket. But if you kind of think about it a little bit more and say, well, these 10 that I see in the bucket are really dependent on that one. If that one sets tomorrow evening, when it sets, this sun in the buckets won't be there either. And therefore, the real sun is only one. Although I might see that sun reflected in the bucket. And that's what the Gita will ultimately tell us. That yes, right now, you feel there is a kshetrajna in you, there is a kshetrajna in you, there is a kshetrajna in you. But maybe the real kshetrajna is only one. And these are all reflections of the kshetrajna. It's good to first look at that reflection. Because sometimes you may not have seen the real sun at all. You're just looking inside the bucket. And you say, there is the sun in my bucket. Then what the Gita is really telling you is, hey, look up. No, I'm just happy with this sun. And then it's, no. And then you look up and say, that's the sun. So that's essentially it. So even when we say there is the divine here, there is a divine in every being, but maybe it's this one big infinite divine that is being reflected in every heart. So there is in the Bhagavata, I think, there is a beautiful story that it's a full moon night and the moon is reflected in the waters of a pond, and there are fish playing in that pond, and so they see the moon in that pond, and they say, we've got a new friend, and they say, let's play with that, and they just playing with that and say, we are now come to stay with us, we are so happy. But then of course the morning comes and then the moon disappears, obviously. And then say, where has the moon gone? And then they look up and they see the bright sun. And that may be how life is. That even when we feel that there is a deeper truth in our heart, we feel that sense of love and something out of this just material, hard, cold reality, that there is something deeper within me. But that deeper within me is only a reflection. But that reflection will help me try to search for the real. And then when I see the real, then I know that the reflection is dependent on the real, but the real is all that exists. Okay. Okay. Oh yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
So Swamiji, for people who, let's say, have had physical abuse and might feel like their body is just a disease in a way, why from this teaching, what would you say to somebody who needs to actually take care of themselves and their body? Like, why floss your teeth? Why exercise? Why nourish the body when it's not really us?
Well, why do you take care of your computer? Your computer is not you. Why do you take your car for servicing regularly? The car is not you. So, in order to take care of something, it doesn't have to be me, right? So long as it is useful for me to get things done, I need to take care of it. So the knowledge that the body is not me does not automatically lead to the conclusion that then why should I take care of it? Because that's the only instrument we have. That's the only way we function in the world. So it's possible to take good care, a responsible care of our body and mind, knowing that they are not me. In fact, it's very liberating in the sense that even when the body and mind are abused, sometimes people are affected by it. But even an intellectual awareness that the body and mind is not real me, that no one can touch the real me. Whatever abuse the world can do, the most that they can do is to the body and mind. And even a person with a little bit of even merely intellectual understanding, of course, if there is a spiritual realization, that's great. But even if it takes time for that, but even an intellectual understanding that the body and mind are not the real me will greatly help in dealing with the injustices that people experience in this world, the abuse that people experience in this world. I think it's very liberating, even from a very utilitarian standpoint. Okay. So we will stop here today. When we begin next week, we will begin with verse number 5. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Padme tayo shritva pranamami muhur muhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Again and again. How many of you remember that I had given you some homework? All right. So I'm happy that many of you have already emailed me. Just to refresh your memory, for those of you who have not done so yet, what I wanted you to do was reread chapter 12, in which Krishna describes a number of qualities essential to be a good devotee. In fact, he says, such a person is dear to me, such a person is dear to me. And all I wanted you to do was make a list of the qualities that are mentioned. As I said, some of those qualities seemed a little bit repetitive, so it's not like every verse is giving a distinct quality. But you have these different qualities mentioned. And so I wanted you to make a short list of the distinct qualities that Krishna said a devotee must have. The kind of qualities Krishna says, a devotee with these qualities is dear to me. So if you haven't done so yet, take a week more. So by next Wednesday, try to do it. Just send me an email with it. And as I said, my ultimate purpose behind this is not to give you grades or anything for what you have done. But first of all, it'll help you understand the chapter better. But what I will do is, after all your responses come in, to kind of consolidate them and make a list of qualities. And then I'll share that list with you. So then that could be one kind of a reference point we can refer to as spiritual seekers. Find out that which of these qualities I think I have in some measure, which of these qualities I need to work harder to acquire. And to the extent we are able to do it, our spiritual life will become deeper. We'll begin to experience greater peace, contentment, and joy in life. So that's the idea. Okay. So this Sunday for satsang, our topic will be escape from God. Next Wednesday, we will continue with the study of the 13th chapter. On Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation at 6 o'clock will continue as usual. So you're welcome for all of these programs. Now we'll conclude with a prayer on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto.